Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. We're taking a plunge into Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. And let me tell you, this book tackles some seriously massive questions about what's in store for humanity. Like, what happens when we achieve things we've always only dreamed of? Immortality, happiness, even godhood, all becoming possible because of technology.
Yeah, it really is something else. It's like Harari is holding up this mirror, right, to our deepest desires and our biggest fears, and he's making us confront the potential consequences, the consequences of our own ingenuity. And the thing is, he's not just speculating, he's grounding everything in history, science, and even philosophy, which makes it, I don't know, even more compelling.
Absolutely. I mean, he just throws out these mind-blowing ideas like how sugar is now more dangerous than gunpowder. It really makes you sit up and pay attention, you know? It
Yeah.
gets you thinking about the path we're on.
It's a great example, that sugar and gunpowder thing. It shows like how progress always has these unintended consequences. We've conquered all this stuff, famine and plague, for example, but now we're dealing with this epidemic of lifestyle diseases. It really makes you wonder what will be the next trade-offs
Yeah,
as we just keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
that's a great point. It's a perfect lead-in to one of the first big themes Harari dives into, conquering death.
You know, he's surprisingly optimistic about how biotechnology could make us live longer. He even says maybe immortality could become a reality.
It's wild when you think about it. For pretty much all of human history, we've been totally at the mercy of disease. Like one little infection could wipe out entire communities, but now we're engineering new antibiotics. We're even discovering entirely new types, like that one they found in 2015. It feels like we're on the verge of rewriting the rules of life. It's mind-boggling. But, Harari doesn't shy away from the potential downsides of all this power. If we can engineer life, well, we can engineer death too. He says the same tools that could save us could also be used to make, well, terrifying bioweapons.
It's like, yeah, two sides of the same coin. The time when humanity was helpless in the face of nature might be ending, but what new dangers are we creating? Think about it.
Yeah.
What if a virus could be, like, tailored to target specific people or even whole ethnic groups? The Black Death almost seems, I don't know, almost primitive by comparison.
That's a chilling thought. It seems like with every step forward, we open up the possibility for something even more destructive. And that brings us to another major shift Harari talks about, the decline of war. He makes this argument that in the 21st century, peace is normal, and war is like becoming rarer and rarer.
I know it might sound strange when you look around the world and see conflicts breaking out, but statistically, we are living in the most peaceful period in human history. Seriously. More people die from, like, suicide and diabetes than from war and homicide. That shows how much things have changed.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? Our perception of the world doesn't always line up with reality. But what's driving this shift away from war? What's changing?
Harari points to a few things. First, the threat of mutually assured destruction. The nuclear weapons, a large-scale war between superpowers is almost unthinkable. Second, our global economy is shifting. It used to be all about material resources, but now it's more about knowledge, which changes everything. You can't just conquer knowledge through brute force.
So it's like that old saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. But, and I think this is important, Harari admits there are still parts of the world where war is profitable. Places where economies are still rooted in physical resources.
Yeah, like the Rwandan conflict over coltan mines back in '98. That's a prime example. Which raises a really important question, doesn't it? Will knowledge really triumph over material resources in the end? Will war become totally obsolete? Or will we always be drawn into conflict because of, I don't know, greed and the desire for control?
Tough question to answer. But while we're thinking about the fate of war, Harari also wants us to consider the future of happiness. Everyone wants to be happy, right? But what if technology offered a shortcut? That's where things get really interesting, I think.
Yeah, it gets into the whole psychology of happiness. He draws on Daniel Kahneman's work on the experiencing self versus the narrating self. It's basically like this. The experiencing self is living in the moment, feeling all the feels. And then the narrating self is the one that tells the story of the experience later on. And that's what shapes our memory and how happy we feel overall.
So wait, you're saying even if something was mostly unpleasant, if it had a great ending, we might remember it as being better than it really was. That's kind of trippy.
That's exactly it. And that's where technology comes in. Harari's suggesting that future tech could actually, like, directly manipulate our feelings. So we could have experiences that feel amazing in the moment, but they might leave us feeling empty and unfulfilled afterward. It's kind of like a virtual roller coaster ride. A rush of excitement, but then you're right back where you started.
It's giving me those dystopian sci-fi vibes, where everyone's plugged into some machine, totally blissed out, but meanwhile, the real world's falling apart around them.
Right. And Harari actually uses a gambler as an example. The gambler loves the thrill of the risk. They get a win now and then, but ultimately, what if they lose everything? Those moments of pleasure, they don't add up to a happy life, do they?
It's a sobering thought. It makes you ask, if we can engineer happiness, is it even real? Or are we just chasing these fleeting pleasures that ultimately leave us wanting more?
And that's where he brings in this really interesting perspective from Buddhism. Buddhists believe that being attached to pleasant sensations is the root of suffering
Hmm.
because it creates this never-ending craving. It's never enough.
Deep stuff. So it sounds like achieving lasting happiness through technology might be tougher than we think.
Definitely more complicated than just like turning up the dopamine and this whole tension between technology and genuine human well-being.
Hmm.
That's a constant theme throughout the book. We've talked about conquering death, reshaping war. But what about our very essence? What about free will? That's what we'll be digging into next time.
Okay, so back to Homo Deus. We've been exploring some seriously big ideas about the future, and now we're going to get into something that's like at the very core of what it means to be human. Free will.
Harari doesn't hold back.
Yep.
He really throws out there the possibility that we might be more like, I don't know, complex algorithms, way more than we'd like to admit.
Oh yeah, for sure. He really makes you question, are our choices really our own? Or are we basically like sophisticated puppets, just dancing to the strings of our biochemistry?
Yeah, it's kind of freaky to think that everything we do, everything we believe, everything we feel, it might all just be the result of stuff happening in our brains, like it's all predetermined or something. So, okay, let's say we are talking algorithms. Does that mean free will is just an illusion? Harari uses this fascinating historical example to illustrate that point. The story of Clever Hans, this horse that everyone thought could do math.
Wait, hold on. A horse doing math? What?
Yeah, so back in the early 1900s, this horse became a total sensation. People really believe he could, like, solve arithmetic problems. They'd ask him a question, and he'd tap his hoof the right number of times. Seemed like, wow, animals are way smarter than we thought.
Yeah, I can see how people would freak out about that. So what was the deal? Was he actually some genius horse?
It turned out Clever Hans wasn't really doing math at all. He was picking up on all these subtle cues from his handler, like tiny things, body language, facial expressions. These things told him when to stop tapping his hoof. So he was super observant, but not a mathematician.
Ah, I see. So we just like projected our own ideas onto the horse. We
Mhm.
wanted to believe he was special.
Exactly. And Harari uses this example to show how easy it is for us to be tricked, even about something as fundamental as consciousness. I mean, if we could be so wrong about Clever Hans, how can we be sure we understand our own minds?
Whoa, that's a big one.
And it all ties back to that whole algorithm thing. If even, like, seemingly complex behavior can be explained by simple algorithms, what does that say about us? About human consciousness? Maybe we're more predictable than we think.
It's a bit unsettling, especially in this age of big data. I mean, algorithms seem to know us better than we know ourselves sometimes.
Right.
Think about how companies like Google use our search history, all that stuff, to like predict what we're going to buy, what we're going to click on next.
It's already happening. And Harari takes it even further. He says, look, if we're just algorithms, then another algorithm could theoretically know us better than we know ourselves.
Okay, that's both amazing and kind of scary, like the ultimate privacy breach. It's not just someone reading our emails, it's an algorithm understanding our deepest desires.
It raises all these questions about control, about autonomy.
Hmm.
Like, if an algorithm can predict what I'm going to do, am I really free to choose?
It's like that classic free will versus determinism debate. But now it's playing out in the digital age. But Harari doesn't stop there, he keeps going. He explores how all this could reshape our beliefs, even challenge the dominant religion of, like, the modern world, like, liberal humanism.
Right. He argues that this idea of, like, individual liberty, the importance of how we feel, all that stuff, it might not hold up so well in a world where tech is blurring the lines between humans and machines.
So how does he see liberal humanism breaking down?
Well, think about it. This idea that we all have this, like, special inner voice, right? It kind of falls apart if you believe our thoughts and emotions are just the product of algorithms.
So, like, that inner voice we think is so unique, maybe it's just a bunch of algorithm whispering to us.
Exactly. And Harari points out that even our strongest beliefs, they usually come down to a mix of, like, ethical judgments, factual statements, and practical guidelines. He uses the abortion debate as an example.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh.
It's such a divisive issue.
Yeah, so both sides often agree on the ethical principle. that human life is sacred, right? But they disagree on the scientific facts. Is a fetus a person? When does life begin? And these factual disagreements, they lead to different conclusions, even though the underlying ethical judgment is the same.
So even when we base our decisions on facts, there's always some interpretation involved, and that's where things get messy.
Exactly. And liberal humanism, with its focus on, like, individual feelings, it can sometimes make those disagreements even worse. It's harder to find common ground when everyone's inner voice is considered, like, equally valid.
Yeah, it's like we're all speaking different languages, unable to understand each other.
And this leads Harari to this radical new vision for the future, where dataism takes over.
Dataism, that sounds kind of intense.
It's like the opposite of liberal humanism in a way. Instead of focusing on individual feelings, it says, look, the universe is basically just a flow of data. And what matters most is processing that information efficiently.
So instead of asking, how does this make me feel,
Yeah.
dataism asks, what does the data say?
Exactly. And since humans are, in this view, just biochemical algorithms, dataism says maybe external algorithms can make better decisions for us.
Wow, okay.
Take self-driving cars, for example. Dataism would say, look, self-driving cars controlled by algorithms. They would make the roads way safer, way more efficient. No more human error. Traffic flows smoothly. Accidents are a thing of the past.
Sounds good in theory, but I don't know, something about it feels kind of off.
That's the heart of the issue. Sure, dataism might bring efficiency, solve some big problems, but it could also strip away our individuality, our agency.
Like, we trade our humanity for a perfectly optimized world, but is that really a world we want?
That's the question Harari wants us to ask. And it becomes even more urgent when you factor in artificial intelligence, AI. We've already seen how AI can beat us at complex games, like chess, Go.
Yeah, remember when Deep Blue beat Kasparov
Yeah.
back in '97? It felt like a real turning point. Like machines were catching up to us in ways we'd never imagined.
And AI's gotten even stronger since then. Harari suggests that as AI keeps developing, it could eventually surpass human intelligence in pretty much everything.
So it's not just robots taking our jobs anymore. It's about AI maybe becoming the dominant force on the planet.
Right.
And that raises a whole other level of questions. What role would humans even play in a world run by AI? Would we be pets, slaves, or something else entirely?
It's both fascinating and terrifying, isn't it?
Are we creating our own successors? Are we making ourselves obsolete?
Harari doesn't give us easy answers, but he does say we need to start thinking about these questions now and prepare for a future where humans might not be at the top anymore. We've explored conquering death, reshaping war, even questioning free will. So where do we go from here? How do we navigate this totally unknown territory? Join us for the final part of our deep dive into Homo Deus. We'll explore Harari's vision for humanity's future and what it all means for us.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It's the final part of our exploration of Homo Deus. We've really gone deep, haven't we? Immortality, AI, the whole shebang. Now for the big question. What does it all mean for the future of humanity?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's what Harari tackles in the last part of the book. He lays out a few different scenarios, some hopeful, some, well, not so much.
Okay, lay it on me. What possible futures are we looking at here?
One scenario is the rise of dataism, remember, that new religion that puts information processing above everything else.
Yeah, dataism, it's a lot to process, honestly. I'm still wrapping my head around it.
It's a big one, right?
Yeah.
In a dataized world, human experiences, our emotions even, they become secondary to the flow of data. We become less like individuals, less about unique perspectives, and more like, I don't know, nodes in a network, just processing information for the greater good.
So kind of like we're all cogs in a giant machine, working towards some big data-driven purpose, but losing our individual sense of meaning along the way.
That's the potential downside for sure. Harari says dataism could lead to a loss of individuality, even maybe a devaluation of human life itself.
That's a pretty dark path. Is there any way tech and human values can coexist? Any hope for that?
There is. Harari offers a more optimistic scenario too. Techno-humanism.
Techno-humanism, okay. That does sound a bit more hopeful.
It imagines a future where tech enhances us. It makes us better. But it still respects our core values as humans. It's all about balance.
Yeah.
Progress, yeah, but also preserving what makes us human.
So instead of just giving in to algorithms and cold logic, we find ways to integrate tech, make it work for us, make us stronger, wiser, even more compassionate.
Exactly. Amplifying our humanity with tech, not replacing it.
I like that. It sounds much better. But how do we make sure tech serves us and not the other way around? Seems tricky.
Harari says we need to start talking about it now, like right
Yeah.
now. We need ethical frameworks, rules for how tech develops, rules that put human well-being first above everything else.
So like a whole new set of guidelines for the 21st century, a techno-humanist manifesto or something to help us navigate all these ethical dilemmas.
Yeah, exactly. And these principles, they can't just be imposed by someone. They have to come from us, from everyone. Scientists, ethicists, policymakers, everyday people, all of us talking and working together.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how we choose to use it, right? What values we prioritize.
That's the key. Harari's reminding us the future isn't set in stone. It's not inevitable. We have a say in this. We have the power to choose.
That's actually pretty empowering. We're not just along for the ride. We can steer the course of human history.
That's right, but that power comes with responsibility. We have to think critically, question everything, and make choices that reflect our values.
So we're at a crossroads.
Hmm.
Do we let fear take over, let tech dictate our future, or do we rise to the challenge and create a world where both humanity and technology thrive?
That's the question Harari leaves us with, and it's a question each of us has to answer for ourselves.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Homo Deus. It's been quite a journey. Big questions, mind-blowing possibilities, a lot to think about.
We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a bit inspiring. As Harari's shown us, the future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it together.
So let's go create a future that's worthy of our humanity. A future where tech helps us live better, more meaningful lives. Thanks for joining us, and keep exploring.